A messy start to the new year across the country. The South pummeled by severe thunderstorms. A tornado touching down in Mississippi. Flash flood warnings in Jackson, Alabama. Damage in Marksville, Louisiana, and a direct hit in Houston, Texas, where Kevin Masterson says lightning caused a fire in his house while he was still inside.
You could tell it was bad very quickly, that we had to get out.
Further north across the Great Plains, another severe system dumping snow and ice. Crews having trouble keeping up with the slick roads. Typical weather this time of year for the Dakotas and Minnesota, but in the Pacific Northwest, Seattle saw its first substantial snow on New Year's in 5 decades.
Millions will be affected by these severe storms. There could be isolated tornadoes, torrential downpours, and this whole system moves into the mid-Atlantic by tomorrow.
From the west to the deep south, a not-so-warm welcome to 2017.
President Barack Obama will give his farewell address in the same place he gave his 2012 election night victory speech. He'll say goodbye January 10th at McCormick Place in Chicago. In a note posted on the White House website, Obama said he's just started writing the speech, which will be a chance to say thank you. But we think we have an idea of what he'll say. The 44th president has already gotten sentimental about his 8 years in office. In a series of tweets on New Year's Day, he reflected on what he believes to be his administration's greatest accomplishments. Among those are job growth, clean energy, and the Affordable Care Act, also referred to as Obamacare. That healthcare legislation is especially important to Obama. He's spending one of his last days in office meeting with Democratic legislators to figure out how to stop President-elect Donald Trump and the Republican-led Congress from repealing and replacing it. Obama also said his farewell address would offer some thoughts on where we all go from here. That could give him another opportunity to give the new administration some subtle parting advice.
If we don't have a strong transatlantic alliance that's standing up for those things, we will be giving to our children a worse world. We will go backwards instead of forwards.
Our vulnerability to Russia or any other foreign power is directly related to how divided, partisan, dysfunctional our political process is.
Donald Trump plans to repeal a number of President Barack Obama's executive actions on his first day in the White House.
On day one, he's going to sign a series of executive orders to do 2 things. One is repeal a lot of the regulations and actions that have been taken by this administration over the last 8 years that have hampered both economic growth and job creation.
That's Trump's press secretary Sean Spicer, but he didn't tell ABC which executive actions Trump plans to undo, leaving many in the media to speculate. And with over 260 executive orders issued by Obama, there could be a lot Trump wants to change. In an outline of his first 100 days, Trump himself promised to cancel every unconstitutional executive action, memorandum, and order issued by President Obama. The speed of Trump's potential action could be noteworthy. About 1 week earlier, former Speaker of the House Newt Gingrich predicted Trump may revoke up to 70% of Obama's executive orders within his first days as president.
A new warning about persecution of Christians around the world in 2017. A ministry called Release International warns that violent attacks on Christians are expected to increase based on the trends from 2016. The ministry says Islamic persecution of Christians has been increasing from Islamic militants and from the governments in Islamic countries. The trends don't look good in India and China either. Recorded attacks from Hindu militants have increased dramatically in India, and China has been cracking down on unregistered churches. Release says the report is, quote, a wake-up call to take our prayers and practical support for our persecuted family to a new level.
The head of a religious research group says about 90,000 Christians were killed because of their faith in 2016. In a recent interview, the founder of the Center for Studies on New Religions cited a new report set to be released later this month by the Center for the Study of Global Christianity. We can't independently verify the statistics until the report comes out, but there were several regions of the world where Christians faced persecution in the past year. Conflicts in North African African countries like Nigeria were a significant source of Christian persecution in 2016. Open Doors USA recorded a 62% increase in violent killings of Christians at the hands of Islamist militant groups like Boko Haram. Christians also face deadly persecution in destabilized Middle Eastern countries like Iraq and Syria, where ISIS and other militants targeted them and other religious minorities. Intolerant governments also pose a lethal threat to Christians. The North Korean regime, in particular, has been accused of committing grave atrocities to stamp out religious belief.
The Polish town of Elk has suffered a day of rioting over the fatal stabbing of a local man outside a kebab shop. A 21-year-old Polish man was killed in a brawl there after throwing a firecracker at the diner. A report suggests the attackers were of Northern African descent, but police have not confirmed the claims. Now, as news of the man's death spread, crowds gathered outside the kebab shop managed by men of foreign descent, chanting racist slogans and throwing rocks and firecrackers at the windows. These pictures were taken at the scene as the situation deteriorated. We understand the crowds still went out onto the street setting fire to 2 restaurants. Is that an overreaction, do you think? How do you read the case?
Well, first of all, we have to remember that only 2 days ago, the truck driver, the Polish truck driver who was killed in Berlin 3 hours before the rampage, which killed 15 and injured dozens, this has really focused the attention of the Poles on what is widely perceived as the Muslim migrant threat to Europe. Secondly, in general, it is the former Soviet bloc countries, the so-called Visegrad 4, which also includes the Czech Republic, Slovakia, and Hungary, which have offered stiff resistance to the attempt by the European Union to impose migrant quotas on individual member countries, regardless of their parliament's will or of their public opinion. So it is really in this context that this should be seen as an expression of nativist anger and resistance to what is seen in Central and Eastern Europe as Western Europe's failed policy of excessive welcoming of the migrants.
And a German research firm says that Italians will seek to quit the euro currency if their standard of living doesn't improve. Now, IFO chief Clemens Fuess said the standard of living in Italy has remained the same since 2000, and if the situation is not changed, then Italians will choose to leave the Eurozone. Italy is the Eurozone's 3rd largest economy, but its stock market has been the worst performer in Europe last year. Italy is hit with financial problems in its banking system. The country has recently approved a bailout plan to help struggling banks.
On Monday, Puerto Rico's new governor was sworn in and immediately promised a push for statehood in a country facing a deep economic crisis. In his inaugural speech, 37-year-old Ricardo Rossello proposed several measures aimed at alleviating the crisis, among them being a proposal to hold a referendum that would ask voters whether they prefer statehood or independence. Rossello added that he also aims to boost public-private partnerships and use that revenue to save a retirement system that faces a $40 billion deficit. In addition, he also announced that he would fly to Washington, D.C. this week to back a bill to admit Puerto Rico as the 51st state.
The Mexican government has announced that gas prices from state oil company Pemex will rise by as much as 20% in January of 2017, stirring outrage throughout the country. Fuel prices in Mexico are already more expensive than those in the US, and while Pemex sells its refined petrol for 50 US cents a litre to international trading partners, 2017 will see Mexicans paying almost $1 for the least expensive fuel. Jorge Montes is a Mexico City taxi driver and says the repeated fuel price hikes have left him working longer hours for less profit.
The minimum wage in Mexico hasn't gone up in years, but the government is always raising the price of petrol. I'm having to work harder than ever just to support my family now that so much of my money goes on petrol.
March 2017 will also see Mexico's petrol market open up to the private sector, and the country's finance ministry has said the price hike comes as a preparation for the incoming competition. However, the public is more skeptical. The 2014 crash in oil prices saw no drop in Pemex rates, and many Mexicans blame the rising prices on institutional corruption.
This country is rich in petrol, yet we pay more at the pump than nations that import fuel. This impunity needs to stop.
Food prices are going to go up. Everything is going to increase. In rural areas, people will starve to death. Transports are already expensive, so imagine how it is going to be after this gas hike.
Now, staying with international news, a massive gang riot at a prison in northern Brazil has left around 60 people dead, marking one of the bloodiest cases of prison violence anywhere in the world in decades. Authorities in the city of Manaus say the death toll could rise as police get a better picture of the scale of the riot that was caused by a fight between rival drug gangs. The rebellion included decapitated bodies being thrown over the prison walls, and it lasted for 17 hours. It ended after prisoners gave up their weapons and freed hostages. Brazil has the fourth largest prison population in the world, and the jail in question was holding more than 1,200 inmates. Islamic State militants have claimed responsibility for the New Year's Eve massacre at an Istanbul nightclub that killed 39 people.
In a statement released through its Amaq news agency on Monday, the Islamic State group said the attack was carried out by a heroic soldier of the caliphate. It said the attacker was following the orders of the group's leader. At a cabinet meeting in Ankara, Turkey's deputy prime minister said the authorities are getting closer to identifying the suspect. He also stated that the Turkish government is cracking down on provocative social media accounts, adding that people posting pro-terrorism messages will face the full force of the law. A massive manhunt is still underway, and police are looking into whether the killer belongs to the same cell that attacked Istanbul's airport in June last year. Turkish authorities have released several pictures of the suspect and said they have made 12 arrests so far. Local media reports say the suspect may have been from Uzbekistan or Kyrgyzstan. The nightclub massacre marks the 19th major terror attack on Turkey since 2015.
Al-Shabaab has claimed responsibility for 2 suicide car bombs that killed at least 20 people near Mogadishu's main airport. One exploded at a checkpoint outside an African Union base and another at a nearby gate. Nearby, civilian buildings were also damaged. Al-Shabaab says one of its targets was the nearby Hotel Peace, where AU leaders met last year to discuss solutions to the ongoing fight against Al-Shabaab in Somalia.
Mangled carcass of a blown-up bus in Baghdad is casually inspected by some and angrily cursed by others.
Who is responsible for that? Who? Only young people are killed, are wounded. Why does it happen?
There was a similar scene at a fruit and vegetable market in Sadr city. It's a place where labourers mill about during the day, and a group of 9 women were passing in a minivan at the wrong time. A while later, in the car park of a hospital in the same city, came another blast. 3 attacks in just a few hours, targeting Shia Muslims. All coordinated and coming on the same day as a visit by the French President François Hollande. He's in Iraq to talk terrorism, mainly Daesh, and the same group that claimed responsibility for the triple bombings. After his meetings in Baghdad, Hollande visited the self-governing Kurdish region in the north to meet French troops and local officials. It's a visit designed to make France and Iraq safer, something that's come too late for Monday's dead and injured.
France's President François Hollande has arrived in the Iraqi capital Baghdad to meet French troops helping government forces battle against Islamic State. And it came just days after the resumption of a large-scale offensive on Mosul, which remains a key ISIL stronghold. However, experts fear the military operation could lead to a bigger problem, even bigger than Islamic State itself. For example, that of the Mosul Dam. It is Iraq's largest. It's already in pretty poor condition. And with the battle for the barrier wall now ongoing, the offensive could destroy it, ultimately causing it to collapse. Well, and this could, I suppose, at the end of the day, have devastating consequences for the country if the worst comes to the worst. Now, the dam is about 60 kilometers north of the city. It's the 4th largest in the entire Middle East. It holds enormous amounts of water, but has been slowly falling apart for some time. Now, if the barrier wall collapses, the city of Mosul could even be destroyed within hours, with the lives of almost 1.5 million citizens under threat. Some scientists even compare the potential damage to that from a nuclear bomb.
It's not easy for the engineers to work and carry out the maintenance work, which needs heavy equipment and injection underneath, and that's a very, very dangerous situation indeed. Unless it clears some kind of secure environment around the dam in order for the engineers to continue the work, it could be a real disaster there, and a lot of people could lose their lives.
The foreign-backed militants have attacked electricity towers near the Syrian capital Damascus, causing blackouts. Local media said the terrorists from the al-Nusra Front were behind the attack. The power cuts have been reported in Quneitra region. The al-Nusra Front is known as an affiliate of al-Qaeda terrorist organization. The group, along with Daesh, has been excluded from the current ceasefire in Syria, which has been brokered by Russia and Turkey.
In a fairly shocking report, the Institute for National Security Studies, or INSS, says that the Lebanese terror group Hezbollah remains the most serious conventional threat that Israel is facing today. The report was submitted to Israeli President Rivlin earlier today and details how Hezbollah is in possession of rockets that can reach anywhere in the Jewish state, precision-guided missiles, attack drones, suicide drones, ground-to-air defense systems, and of course a lot of militarily trained manpower. The report goes on to describe how Hamas, while enjoying a period of respite since the 2014 Gaza war, is building up arms in an apparent preparation for another conflict with Israel. With respect to dealing with Hezbollah, however, the Institute advised increasing intelligence efforts and continuing to disrupt Hezbollah's supply lines. The advice for dealing with Iran was a little bit more difficult. At the moment, Iran is not the biggest existential threat to the Jewish state, but Iran's funding of paramilitaries is a growing issue, and the possibility of dealing with a nuclear-powered enemy state is allegedly just over the horizon.
The military parade was initially called for December the 2nd to mark the 60th anniversary of the arrival of Granma, the yacht which brought Fidel Castro and the nucleus of his guerrilla army to Cuba to launch the revolution. The parade was postponed after Fidel Castro died. Now it's become a tribute to him. Taking the salute, President Raul Castro was also aboard the Granma, as was Vice President Ramiro Valdez standing beside him. The event was also intended to send a message to the United States that Cuba is in no mood to compromise as it awaits the arrival of President-elect Donald Trump.
Cuba will not renounce any of its principles or concessions to its sovereignty and independence. It will not yield its defense of the revolution and its anti-imperialist ideals.
At its peak, the Cuban army was 300,000 strong, a battle-hardened combat force which in the 1970s and 80s fought in the independence wars in Africa. Today it shrunk to around 45,000 personnel.
The military is no longer the fighting force it once was, but today it does play a powerful role in the Cuban economy.
Dozens of South Korean Army artillery units have been taking part in a large-scale drill on the inter-Korean border. The exercises serve the purpose of sending a strong warning to Pyongyang that any attack will come at a price.
North Korea fires off hundreds of artillery rounds into the south, damaging several South Korean military bases. Within seconds, South Korea's counter-artillery radar detects the origin of the shots. Dozens of tanks, including homegrown K9 heavy artillery units, take aim at the designated targets and fire off hundreds of artillery rounds. Bullseye. The targets are totally demolished. This is all part of counter-target exercise undertaken by the South Korean Army's artillery unit on Monday to better prepare against artillery attacks from the north. The South Korean military says the drills are to warn Pyongyang that Seoul is ready to counter any threats from the regime. 38 Army artillery units nationwide with 35 K9 self-propelled heavy artillery and over 150 other tanks took part in the drills.
Last year, Ed Gernon adopted a dog named Rex. The shepherd mix was feral.
He was dangerous. I mean, he fought with other dogs and he killed cats. He was an animal that had learned to live on the streets and to survive by his own hunting ability, I guess.
So you can imagine the shock when one afternoon, just a month after his adoption, Rex became the rescuer.
And he suddenly stopped, and he would not move.
Saving a tiny and very sick hummingbird.
I mean, it's tiny. And it's dead, as far as I'm aware. It's covered in ants. It's got no feathers.
Here's the other twist in this story. This is the hummingbird now. 1 year after her rescue, Hummer, as she is called, is still living inside Gernon's home.
It's crazy. You live with Tinkerbell. It's like that's what this is like.
And it's been a long flight. Gernon had to nurse her back to life literally. He feeds her a special sugary formula every 15 minutes from sun up to sundown.
And you find yourself doing stuff you never thought in a million years you would do.
Even Rex was willing to share his water bowl with Hummer.
There was this little creature, this fragile creature that the whole world wanted to kill, and he was trying to protect her. So I thought I'd go the distance.
And look how far they've come. Gernon taught Hummer how to fly using a hairdryer. She sleeps in his glasses. She even lets him steal a kiss. While we had to start by taking video of her outside the kitchen window, Hummer soon opened up to us.
Yes, girl.
Buzzing around our camera, perching atop our tripod. She even let me touch my finger to her beak. That's awesome. It's been more than a year since Hummer arrived here, and Gernon knows eventually she will spread her wings.
It's time for her to start mating. And I keep leaving the doors and windows open thinking she'll leave.
And while she's here, her little wings have made a big impact.
I rescue this dog. He rescues the bird. The bird rescues all of us in a weird sense. And it's just a miracle.
That it is. In Whittier, Christine Lazar, CBS 2 News.